In mid-August of 2007, the U.S. military had launched a major operation in the Tora Bora area of the Spin Ghar Mountains in Nangarhar Province, Afghanistan, that seems to have almost completely disappeared from history. But, as I was there, here it is. The Tora Bora Mountains are in Pachir-a-Agam district in the southern portion of Nangarhar Province and border Pakistan further to the south. The Tora Bora is part of the Spin Ghar Mountains, which run east-west for around 75 miles, and the southern side of these mountain passes open into the federally administered tribal areas, or Fatah, of Pakistan. Tora Bora means black cave, and was rumored to abound in caves and hiding places. As such, Spin Ghar has been a haven for insurgent forces for nearly 40 years, including the Soviet occupation from 1979 to 1989. There have long been rumors of massive cave complexes in these mountains that held underground hospitals, a hydroelectric power station, a hotel, multiple arms and ammunition storage warehouses, and roads large enough to drive tanks into, all part of a very sophisticated tunnel and ventilation system. These rumors all turned out to be horseshit, as Tora Bora was full of natural cave formations that offered sufficient hiding places for a few hundred troops or storage locations for arms and munitions. Nevertheless, the Spin Ghar was a massive maze-like system of mountains that one could too easily get lost in. One of the major advantages of the White Mountains was it bordered with the Fatah in Pakistan, providing immediate refuge and safety when things became either too hot or too cold. Too hot if your enemy was dropping bombs all around you, or too cold when winter finally arrived. Heading through the many passes in the south gave you immediate relief when you arrived in neutral Pakistan, and this tactic has been employed yearly since at least 1979. During the summer fighting season, the Tora Bora would be full of Taliban fighters from the Tora Bora Front and their allies, Al-Qaeda terrorists and Haqqani network fighters, all of whom would conduct terrorist and insurgent operations into Nangarhar and the neighboring provinces. In 2007, I was a CIA paramilitary officer in Afghanistan, working with our counter-terrorist pursuit team focused on hitting Al-Qaeda and Taliban targets throughout Nangarhar province. In the late summer, we received notice that the U.S. Army was planning a major offensive in the Taliban stronghold of the Spin Ghar Mountains, aka Tora Bora. The U.S. military had been carefully planning and identifying numerous targets throughout the White Mountains based on their own reconnaissance and on select intelligence reports provided by assets ran by a number of the CIA case officers. They asked if we would support this operation with Afghan partners, the PM officers, and Navy SOF operators, and of course, our chief readily agreed. Now, earlier that spring and summer, one of our case officers received excellent intelligence on the Taliban's Tora Bora front in the Spin Ghar Mountains. This targeting information helped the U.S. Air Force conduct about 3 or 4 select precision strikes in the mountains with devastating effect. We learned that Anwar-ul-Haq Mujahid, the leader of the Tora Bora front, had wept, not because of the loss of some of his sons in one of the strikes, but because a number of Arab fighters had been killed by these precision F-16 delivered strikes. Arab fighters were foreign specialists and treated with respect. We also heard that Mujahid restricted his fighters from gathering in groups greater than 3 for fear that greater numbers would attract a 500-pound laser-guided bomb that would leave body parts hanging in the trees. In fact, the Taliban fighters thought we were also dropping chemical weapons because of the overpowering smell that would result after the strikes. Turns out they weren't used to the smell of fragmented body parts rotting. Now, the U.S. military's plan was to hit a large number of targets in the Tora Bora on a single night using B-52s, B-1s, B-2s, F-16s, Predators, and even HIMAR rockets. Targets were specifically assigned based on the best munition system to inflict the most damage on these targets, whether they were compounds, bunkers, cave entrances, and camps within the Spin Ghar. Then in the pre-dawn hours after these initial strikes, airlift hundreds of 82nd Airborne troopers to block the southern passes into Pakistan to capture or kill the Taliban, Haqqani, and al-Qaeda remnants that tried to flee to the safety of Pakistan. Now, our job was to establish blocking positions in the northern foothills of Tora Bora to capture or kill any who might be forced to flee north. U.S. Army Special Forces working out of Jalalabad would also establish blocking positions with their ODAs along the northern foothills. This operation was planned to kick off the night of 12-13 August 2007, well before the fighting season ended and the Taliban and al-Qaeda fighters would typically head south into Pakistan for their Christmas vacation. But there was a problem. Only days before the operation would start, intelligence surprisingly reported that Anwar-ul-Haq Mujahid had directed that all of his fighters should start winter break early, way early. There were no Taliban fighters left in Tora Bora. The precision strikes conducted by the Air Force that spring and early summer had been so punishingly effective that Commander Mujahid decided to quit early. He and his men were going back to Pakistan to refit and recover in preparation for the next year's fighting season. So, we had a big VTC that included General Dan K. McNeill, the ISAF commander, Lieutenant Colonel Menes, commander of the 508th Infantry Regiment of the 82nd Airborne, U.S. Special Forces leadership, the Chief of Station for Kabul, our local chief Kevin, and the PM officers. In this meeting, our case officer reported that Anwar-ul-Haq Mujahid and all of his fighters were gone. Tora Bora was a dry hole. Our local chief advised General McNeill to postpone the op. The operational bunkers, caves, and other facilities in the Tora Bora were well documented. It was an excellent plan. Save this operation for the next summer when the Taliban and al-Qaeda returned from vacation. General McNeill was in a bind. This was a huge operation with numerous units participating, including Army and Air Force. To turn something like this off was a major decision. McNeill turned to the COS up in Kabul and asked his opinion. The COS thought about it and then declared, "It's your decision, General." McNeill thought about it carefully and made the command decision to go forward with the operation. I can remember how all of us PM officers were disappointed that the COS did not back up our on-the-ground assessment and advice. Instead, he rode the fence. So, a few days later, just as it got dark, we deployed with a couple hundred of our commandos to our blocking position. U.S. SOF deployed their teams, including one ODA that would be airlifted to a position higher in the mountains to provide early warning and targeting if they spotted any fighters moving north out of the foothills to our position or any of the other ODA blocking positions. One squad of Afghan commandos infiltrated with that ODA so they would be a larger force in case they made contact. Now, this was one of my first trips to Afghanistan with the agency, and though I was pretty new, I fully understood that some Afghan units rarely worked with anyone in the military. We trained them. Now, paramilitary officers or ground branch officers come almost exclusively from the special ops community across the military. We were all former military, usually Army Special Forces, Army Rangers, Navy SEALs, Marine Force Recon and MARSOC, and even a few Air Force combat controllers and PJs. I was former Special Forces and knew that invariably any Special Forces ODA would take care of any indigenous forces they worked with because that is SF's bread and butter. It's what SF does. But my PM chief, a great dude by the way, was a former Marine, so I was surprised with everything that I knew that he would be comfortable with a squad we felt responsible for deploying for potentially an entire week with no ability to contact them or learn their status without going through an SFODB first. And my chief did that without a second thought. Honestly, I would have made the same decision because I was former SF and I knew these guys would be well cared for. But I didn't understand why my PM chief would break protocol, especially as he was a former Marine. So I asked him why. He said simply, "They're SF, they'll take care of them." And he was right. In fact, days later, when the op was done and that ODA was exfiltrated along with the indigenous squad of soldiers back to base camp, their comments on the Afghans were nothing but excellent. The ODA told us, "These guys immediately went into their security positions off the helicopter. We didn't have to tell them to do anything. They were awesome." Only SF had the ability to truly appreciate the Afghans' capabilities. So that first night in, while we were establishing a base camp in the foothills and that ODA was infiltrated by CH-47, someone called out, "Incoming!" and we all hit the dirt. Within a few seconds, we realized that this was the kickoff. The rockets our guys had seen with night vision were not the 107mm rockets that the Taliban and Al-Qaeda would jury-rig to launch in our general direction with zero accuracy, but rather they were the HIMARS rockets fired by the 27th Field Artillery Regiment from the 18th Airborne Corps from their positions north of us, flying over us to hit their selected targets in Tora Bora. The rest of that night, the Air Force pounded their assigned targets with B-1 Lancers and B-52 Stratofortresses. There are reports that 6 B-2s were halfway there on their 3,000-mile flight, but were canceled for fear of civilian casualties. One of the most epic flights was 4 F-16 Falcons flying all the way from Joint Base Balad, Iraq, that made an 11-hour flight that included 13 mid-air refuelings, flew over 6 countries, and dropped 15 GBU-38 500-pound laser-guided bombs on high-value targets. By early morning on the 13th of August, the 508th Infantry Regiment of the 82nd Airborne were airlifted into their southern blocking positions. That next day, another PM officer and I led a squad up into the immediate foothills above base camp to provide early warning for any fighters squirting in our direction. One news article reported that this operation was focused on getting Osama bin Laden, who was supposedly there to rally forces. And it is true we had some vague reports that he was spotted in the area, but these reports lacked any substance and we considered them Elvis sightings and ignored them. The military leadership working this operation gave it no credence either, but it makes for a good attention-grabbing headline. While above base camp, we observed AH-64 Apache gunships hitting some old fighting positions. The position was unoccupied, but the Apaches had the ordnance, so they emptied their rocket pods into the bunkers. While up there, we were resupplied with food and water by CH-47 Chinooks. After a day or two with zero contact, we did see one old man leading a donkey. We hiked back down to find that pretty much everyone, including the 508th Infantry Regiment, had made practically zero contact. I believe a couple of stragglers were captured, probably the lame, sick, and lazy left behind. Effectively, the entire operation was a dry hole, and our intelligence was proven to be 100% accurate. When I tried to research this operation online, I found a few news articles about this operation, all of which were written and published in the first days of the operation. And a number of them report enemy casualties, but that does not match with my memory. There is almost no mention in Army military histories, and I think that if an operation had actually killed 50 terrorists, it would have been well documented. The one official account I could find mentioned the 508th Infantry Regiment deploying to Nangarhar Province in a single paragraph. The airstrikes were not mentioned at all except for a single article describing the 4 epic F-16 pilots who earned the Mackay Trophy for their 11-hour flight. It's understandable. No contact, nothing to report. It became a live-fire exercise with very little media visibility after the fact, and it quickly disappeared. But the worst part was that a team from U.S. SOF, while moving in their Humvees to a blocking position, hit an IED that killed 2 SF troopers and an Army Civil Affairs soldier working with them. Sergeant Charles B. Katowski was a 37 Foxtrot, a psychological operations specialist from the 345th Psychological Operations Company, 2nd Psychological Operations Group. He left behind a fiancée. Sergeant First Class Jeffrey D. Kettle was an 18 Charlie, a Special Operations Engineer Sergeant. It was his second tour in Afghanistan, and he left behind a wife and 2 sons. Staff Sergeant Jesse G. Clowers was an 18 Echo, a Special Operations Communications Sergeant. It was his first tour in Afghanistan, and he left behind a wife, a son, and a baby daughter he never got to meet.